Welcome to the Workflow Podcast. Many moons ago, the Roman philosopher and statesman Seneca said that life is not short if you know how to use it. He added that people are frugal with their money, but not so their time, which is the one thing it is right to be stingy with, because time, unlike money, cannot be earned back once you've spent it. He was right. We waste so much of our time at work, to the detriment of our professional goals, our health, our personal relationships, and our experience of life. My name is Steve Glaveski, and I'm the founder of Innovation Accelerator Collective Campus and the author of several books and numerous Harvard Business Review articles on all things productivity and performance at work. My mission with this show is to help you unlock your potential to do more great work in far less time, whether you're working as part of a team or flying solo, and to set you up for a richer life. If you enjoy this show, please like, share, and/or subscribe. And if you'd like to learn more about my work and connect with me online, visit steveglaveski.com. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Workflow Podcast for episode number 3 of season 1, which is all about the foundations. The foundations of high performance, productivity, and effectiveness at work. So in the previous 2 episodes, we looked at purpose and incentives, and today we're looking at passion. Now, as I've previously discussed, it is my belief that the 4 foundations of high performance are purpose, incentives, passion, and strengths. And when I say purpose, I think that lends itself also to values alignment, but perhaps I'll do a separate episode on values alignment. And the point of this episode is really to dig into some of the scientific literature on passion to see whether or not it actually validates what I've been saying all this time, and whether or not there are any caveats to the role that passion plays in our work and our performance at work more specifically. So nowadays there is a bit of a cult of passion, if you will. We do hear people say things like, follow your passion, do what you love. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, I must have picked this frame up that says do what you love every day from a flea market many moons ago. And I mean, it sounds good. The premise sounds good. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But is that actually true? What if you're passionate about sneakers or perhaps early 90s NBA trading cards? I know I've got a whole bunch of those stashed away somewhere, including a Dominique Wilkins 1988 or 87. I'm not sure of the year, but it was a mid-80s rookie card. Hopefully that's worth something nowadays, although the last time I checked, I don't think it was worth more than $50. So I'm not saying that you can't cultivate a living or even a very successful living in these particular fields, but chances are you're going to find it astronomically more difficult to do so rather than following, say, some more conventional path like becoming an accountant. And I guess that leads me to a number of questions. Is following your passion enough? What if your passion is obsessive? Is following your passion sustainable? Does passion fade when you start getting paid for it? And can passion lead us down the wrong path? Because as Friedrich Nietzsche once said, convenient sounding maxims usually don't stand up to empirical testing, and do what you love is indeed a convenient sounding maxim that might look good on an Instagram post, on a coffee mug, on a picture frame, but does it stand up to empirical testing? And so that's what we're going to be exploring today. Now, it's important that when we look at the topic of passion, that we delineate between the 2 types of passion that researchers have identified. Now, the leading researcher in this space would have to be Robert J. Vallerand from Quebec, Montreal in Canada. And he and his team of researchers posited that there are 2 types of passion. 1, harmonious passion, and 2, obsessive passion. So what is harmonious passion? Well, they found that harmonious passion is internalized by people and it's free of any contingencies. So people tend not to identify too closely with the passion. The passion doesn't hold an over-empowering space on a person's identity, and one is essentially free to choose that activity on a day-to-day basis, free of external pressure or internal pressure. That is essentially a healthy, harmonious passion. An obsessive passion, on the other hand, is essentially coupled with someone's identity. It typically has a number of contingencies, such as our sense of self-worth, our sense of self-acceptance, and social validation as well. We also are likely to derive excitement and a dopamine hit from the activity, which is not at all dissimilar to what, say, an addict experiences, and therefore we become addicted to said activity in a way where it might be too powerful to regulate in lieu of other activities that may be healthier for us at the time. And that's something I'll touch on later today. But you might like an activity, but if you're obsessive about it, you feel compelled to engage in it because of all of these contingencies. So harmonious passion and obsessive passion. So as you might have inferred from that, harmonious passions typically are good, whereas obsessive passions typically are not so good. Now, researchers have found that harmonious passions actually predict positive behaviors and outcomes. They predict us putting in the energy, the effort to get to mastery, which then precedes positive outcomes, better results, better performance, which again motivates us to keep putting in said time and effort. Whereas the same research has found that obsessive passion is actually associated with negative outcomes such as shame, rumination after an activity, and highly persistent behavior that may be ill-advised. So this could extend to, say, cycling on icy roads or dancing while injured. And I know for a long time, I was obsessive about going to the gym, and part of my identity was wrapped up with waking up at, say, 5 a.m. every day and getting in an hour-long workout. And this is definitely fits the criteria of an obsessive passion, but I also found that because I was doing that, I would oftentimes skip on evening social outings. I would leave early because I wanted to be up early in the morning. And ultimately, I would train even when I was injured. And so this led to longer-term deleterious effects in terms of my social life, in terms of my physical health. And so I had to revisit that and shift away from blindly following this obsessive passion and just doing it because it was wrapped up with my identity. And I needed to move away from that and derive a sense of identity from healthier places, from a broader spectrum of places, as well as from within myself, which is a topic for another day. But obsessive passion can get in the way of a lot of other aspects of life. I mean, it could also mean that, as one of my friends and director of the film, the longevity film, Cale Brock, once told me on a podcast episode, you might think you're healthy sitting all alone at home with your green smoothie, but it turns out that two mates at a bar sharing a beer might actually be healthier at that point in time because of the benefits of socializing and the release of oxytocin and positive neurochemicals that come with that. So something to bear in mind there, but I digress. So obsessive passion, not only can it result in highly persistent negative behaviors and negative outcomes, but it can also be blinding in the sense that we could have blinders on. Our sense of reality is not quite aligned with what reality actually is. So, for example, you could think about the countless wannabe Hollywood starlets over in Hollywood who might find themselves in their 50s still waiting tables and telling anybody who would care to listen about that time they auditioned for a role but lucked out to Jennifer Aniston at the pinnacle of her career, right? So, as the pinnacle of their career, rather. So, this is just one really tiny nuanced example of that, but I'm sure you can relate to the idea of passion leading us down the garden path. I know so many musicians who follow their passion only for them to be to follow the definition or to fit the definition of starving musician well into their 40s and 50s. Now, that's not to say that's a bad thing. If you're happy with that, that's completely fine. Ultimately, happiness is a byproduct of our expectations. And if we accept what is, and we get to spend more time doing what we love, well, you might actually be happy. But today what we're looking at is really about passion and its impact on performance and positive outcomes, and in particular, positive outcomes when it comes to work, such as financial performance. Now, when it comes to said performance, whether it's in the financial domain or in the sporting domain, Valorant also did some work on passion and performance attainment in sport. And again, he found that harmonious passion is conducive to high levels of performance as well as living a happy life, whereas obsessive passion was a much less reliable predictor of performance and is completely unrelated to happiness. Now, this might also align with why so many obsessive people might get to some semblance of success in their field, but may ultimately be unhappy because that success is there to validate their sense of self. And that is often fickle, because what happens is you might just compare yourself to the next person in your domain and say, well, that person's better or more successful than me. And before you know it, you're back at homeostasis, that baseline level of happiness or unhappiness, and it doesn't really get you to where you thought it would get you. And this is why people like, say, Dan Harris, who wrote the book 10% Happier, after going on his own spiritual journey, found that disassociating from results was one way to really be present and immersed in the task at hand and enjoy it without being too attached to the outcome. Because being too attached to an outcome can ultimately rob us of the joy of the activity in the first place. So moving on from that, over the past few years, especially since 2016 when Angela Duckworth published her book Grit, there's been a hell of a lot of talk about persistence and the role it plays in success, and it's something I totally agree with. I think, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, you can be talented, educated, you could be a genius, but doesn't matter what you pursue, doesn't matter how good your team is, your product, how good you are, you will inevitably face adversity, difficulty, challenges, setbacks if you're pursuing something worthwhile, if you're trying to take a new product to the world, if you're trying to transform an industry, or if you're just trying to get good at playing the guitar. And if you are not comfortable with that adversity, if you're not comfortable with discomfort, you're more likely to quit. So persistence is absolutely key. But emerging research since Angela's book came out on grit finds that grit without passion is just a grind, and it's not likely to result in positive outcomes long term. You're more likely to quit. Whereas grit with passion has a much stronger relationship when it comes to perseverance and performance in the long term. So grit without passion, it's mere drudgery, it's mere grind. Grit with passion is much more likely to propel us forward. Similarly, and this aligns with what I've been talking about over the past few episodes, your passion, purpose, incentive, strengths, purpose plus passion is more likely to get you to a positive outcome than passion alone. This is from a 2018 study published in DIJB, which found that performance at work, if it's tied to purpose, is going to be a much stronger predictor of success. And this is something that Jan Jakimovic points out, that when you have purpose underpinning your passion, you'll be much more likely to weather the inevitable storms of hardship and difficulty that come your way. He actually found that people who chased passion alone were much more likely to quit their jobs within 9 months, whereas those who followed their purpose were less likely to quit. So there are different schools of thought out there where some people, like Jan Jakimovic, has been quoted as saying, follow your purpose, not your passion. Others say follow your passion, not your purpose. But I really think it's a matter of cultivating and following both, because when you have both, you're far more likely to succeed. Now, the reason why Jan says things like follow your purpose, it's because, like I said a few moments ago, whatever you pursue, you're going to face hardship. And if you're leveraging passion alone, passion is fickle. It is a little bit like happiness. You're more likely to quit. Whereas if you have purpose, if you have meaning behind what you're pursuing, that should be enough to get you playing the long game. And it's something people like Jordan Peterson also say, Happiness is fickle, it comes and goes. Rather than trying to cultivate a happy life, cultivate a life of meaning, because that will give you the energy, the fuel, the motivation you need to push through the inevitable setbacks and the suffering that is, in many respects, a characteristic of human life. So with that, is passion something that you find? Is it something that you should have found by now, or is it something that you develop? And again, on this point, Jan Jakimovic says it's something that you develop, not something that you find, which I guess is a little bit like, say, romantic relationships, love, personal, interrelationships. I mean, yes, the 20th century and movies, TV shows, music definitely glorified the idea of love at first sight, but as anybody in a long-term relationship knows, romantic relationships take a lot of work, and sometimes you might not have that spark, but that spark will develop over time. And it's the same with passion. Now, needless to say, you might already have found that passion. Sometimes you might have the love at first sight when it comes to a specific activity, but I think in a world where so many people don't have passions, don't have hobbies, because it's all too easy to just numb ourselves and be preoccupied by our phones and Netflix all the time, knowing that one can develop a passion by committing to a particular activity rather than having to find it, I think should allay some people of cause for concern when it comes to their work, but also it applies to entrepreneurs. And so many people who want to be entrepreneurs say things like, I want to start a business, but I just don't know what to do. I don't know what idea to pursue. And, sometimes you just got to pursue anything. And on that journey, you'll learn things that will help you come up with that idea. It's like Steve Jobs famously said, you don't connect the dots looking forwards, you connect the dots looking backwards. And as Paulo Coelho perfectly communicated in his book, The Alchemist, sometimes you need to go on a journey to realize that the treasure was at your feet the entire time. Again, passion isn't just something you find, but something you develop. Now, you might be passionate about something, but what if it becomes your job? Does that change how you feel about it? I'm compelled to think about Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer on this point. There's a classic scene in Tom Sawyer where young Tom has been tasked with painting a fence and he wants to go out and play with his friends, but so be it, I'm going to immerse myself in this activity. And his friend walks by and says, haha, you're painting the fence. And Tom basically said, well, that's fine. Like, I didn't get to do this every day. This is fun, essentially. And his friend then basically asked him, hey, can I paint a little? After seeing how much fun Tom was having. And Tom initially pushed back, but after much persistence, Tom said, hey, look, I'll let you paint the fence, but only if you give me your apple. And that's a classic case study on the differentiation between a task as work and a task as play. And in fact, Mark Twain himself said that work consists of whatever you're obliged to do. Play consists of whatever you're not obliged to do, which kind of echoes the definitions of harmonious passion being something you're not obliged to do, and obsessive passion being something you're obliged to do, whether you're internally obliged or externally obliged. Now, on this concept of being paid for what we do, on the flip side, if we attach a dollar figure to our passions, we do risk that becoming a job. And when we see it as a job, we risk losing the play, the excitement, the enthusiasm that we once may have had about that particular activity. So it's worth noting that while you might enjoy doing something in your day-to-day because it's something you freely choose to do and it's not attached to income, it's not attached to any specific outcome, you're just enjoying the process, if you do make that your job, it is worth being conscientious of the fact that you may actually destroy your passion for that particular activity. Now, that's not true in all cases, definitely not, but it is a risk. So I guess what this all boils down to is the fact that, one, yes, passion is a predictor of high performance. However, that passion should be harmonious and shouldn't be tied to your sense of self-worth, to external validation and things of that persuasion, because it might get you success in the short term, but in the long term, it's less sustainable and may also lead to unhappiness. So I guess when you see these coffee mugs that say things like, follow your passion, perhaps we need some permanent marker, cross off the follow, replace that with develop, add harmonious in between your own passion, and there we have develop your harmonious passion. And passion, again, is a predictor of success, providing it is harmonious. So I will leave you with that for today's installment of the Workflow podcast. Of course, if you'd like to read more about this topic, visit stevegloveski.com, where you'll also find 300 plus other articles, 400 plus other podcast episodes on my other podcast, the Future Squared podcast, and a whole bunch of other downloadable goodies, all about innovation, productivity, high performance, and effectiveness at work. So with that, I'm going to bid you adieu and remind you once again to follow and or develop your harmonious passion. Peace out.